Hi, today for my demonstration I will be making what I refer to as imitation Chipotle Soyken. A while back I found a really nice recipe for an imitation Chipotle chicken marinade and I absolutely loved it. It had great flavor and resulted in super tender grilled chicken. And then about a month ago I started following a vegan diet due to some health issues I was having, and what I missed most was this Chipotle chicken. So I turned to the internet to find a recipe to make tofu chicken in an attempt to replicate this Chipotle chicken that I love so much. This recipe requires you to plan ahead, as you need to press the tofu, freeze the tofu, thaw, and then press it again. For this first step, you will need 2 cutting boards, a variety of paper towels, scissors, a sharp knife, a container with a lid, and 1 pound of super firm tofu. There are 5 varieties of tofu ranging from silken to super firm. Silken has been pressed the least prior to packaging and has the highest water content, while the super firm that I'm using has been pressed thoroughly, and when you open the package you'll find little to no water left in there. This recipe you could use any variety of the 5 tofus, but I prefer to do the super firm just because of its high protein content at 14 grams per serving. In comparison, the silken tofu only has 4 grams per serving due to its high water content. Alright, before opening your package, you should begin by washing your hands with warm water and soap. Alright, so to begin, we're going to carefully open this package. And you'll see with the silken tofu, there's just barely any water left in there. With the super firm, if this were to be silken, you would see a lot more water left over. Alright, we're going to start by turning this on its side, and carefully with the knife cutting it in half. It doesn't have to be perfect, but later when we go to make the bite-sized nuggets, this is going to help us. So we have 2 almost even slices. Grab some paper towels, set it down on the larger cutting board, transfer the 2 blocks, another layer of paper towels, and topping with the second cutting board. There's a few ways you could press this tofu. My preferred method is to set up the cutting boards and then use my body weight to press out the water. If you wanted a more hands-off method, you could set up the cutting boards and add a few heavy books and walk away. But I'm going to begin by just trying to do even pressure on these 2 blocks. You'll know you're doing it right if you look down and see that your paper towels are getting wet. So, do this a little bit. You only do so much and then your paper towels aren't going to absorb anything. So we see that it is being pressed. Transfer these again. I'm just going to do this a second time. It's nearly impossible to get all of the water out. We're just trying to get out as much as we can. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect because after freezing and thawing, we're going to be doing this a second time. I would say this is good enough for me. You take both of these, place them into a container. Add your lid and pop it into the freezer. It's been about 5 hours. I've just washed my hands and the tofu is frozen solid. You could leave it in the fridge to thaw, but oftentimes we are in a rush and don't quite have the time for that. So I'm going to transfer it to a microwave safe plate. Don't want to get any microplastics in my food as I use the microwave. Come on over here. I'm going to thaw by weight. It's 1 pound and start. While we have the tofu blocks thawing in the microwave, we can get started on the marinade. And this is the one inspired by Chipotle. So I've got my mise en place set up here. We're going to start with 1 teaspoon of cumin. Put that in there. 1 teaspoon of oregano. 1 teaspoon of black pepper. 2 teaspoons of salt. 1 tablespoon of chili powder. 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Make sure we get all of that. Next, the recipe calls for an entire can of Chipotle peppers in adobo sauce. If you use the entire can, it's going to be very spicy. So my recommendation is to pick out 3 or 4 of the actual chilies, save the rest for later, but use the entire sauce. Put those in. I'm just using a spatula so we don't miss any. The last ingredient for this marinade is a 3/4 cup of water. You'll notice that the color is a bit strange. To make sure I got all of the sauce, I filled up the can with water and then used that to get my measurement. Last but not least, we have, the recipe calls for 4 cloves of garlic. I have 2 and then 1 that's larger for a total of 4. Alright, now we're just going to use this immersion blender. You could use a regular blender as well. This is what I have on hand. And we're just going to blend until smooth. So I have a few chunks of chilies. Alright, now we're just going to save this until the tofu is thawed. Our tofu blocks are done thawing. If you look at them now, you can see it's gone back to its normal tofu color. And the reason that we pressed, froze, thawed, and we're about to press again, throughout that freezing process, it kind of magically changes the tofu's texture. And then when we press it, For the final time, it's much more like a sponge and willing to accept the marinade. So that's the reasoning behind that process. Now we're going to go back to the first thing we did, which is set up our cutting boards and paper towels again. And we got out most of the moisture the first time we did this, but the more moisture we can get out now, the more marinade it's going to absorb later. So again, don't have to get all of it out, but just enough. And you're going to see already that the towels have taken on some of that moisture. Set these aside. Flip them over and just do this one more time. Okay, I'm going to call that good. All right. Our next step is to get this marinade ready. So transferring from this container into the bag. And it's not going to hurt to have a little bit extra water so we can rinse this container. Just to help us get that last little bit of marinade. Okay, now for the fun part. Now we're going to try to make the imitation chicken nuggets. So we're going to just gently break off bite-sized pieces. If you look close, it does kind of have a flaky chicken texture to it. And then we're just going to carefully drop these into the bag. Not a precise science here. Just bite-sized pieces. We cut the large block in half earlier because if you were to just keep it as a one solid block, it wouldn't quite be a bite size. So cutting it in half earlier helps us now. Right, now that those two blocks are entirely cut up, I'm going to squeeze the air out of this bag. And then massage these bits around a little bit, just to make sure they're entirely coated. Like with any marinade, the longer you let your meat or meat substitute soak, the more that the flavor will immerse into that product. So if you have the time, overnight would be great. If you only have a couple hours, that will be fine too. Just know that it's going to be more flavorful the longer you let it marinate. So I see that they're all fully coated now. And we're going to come back to these tomorrow morning, let them marinate overnight, and we'll be back. Alright, these tofu nuggets have been marinating overnight, about 16 hours. Again, the longer you marinate them, the more flavorful they're going to be at the end, but really, whatever you have time for is fine. If this were to be a meat product like beef or chicken, at this point I would want to drain the marinade to avoid bacteria coming into contact with the cooked product. But since tofu is a protein food that can be eaten raw. We don't have to worry about the bacteria, but I'm still going to pick each individual nugget out and not use the marinade, simply to end up with a more crispy nugget in the end. Alright, all of our nuggets have been transferred out of the marinade. Still see that there's some on there, but the majority of it is still in the bag. Now to make a coating so it's a little bit more crispy, I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of cornstarch and 1 teaspoon of chili powder. I follow a gluten-free diet for my celiac disease. So if you don't follow a gluten-free diet, you could replace this cornstarch with regular flour or breadcrumbs, whatever you'd like to do there. So I'm going to add these in. Now we're just going to gently toss the nuggets in this breading. It's all coated, and I prepared a baking sheet with parchment paper and some olive oil. We're just going to evenly spread these nuggets over the parchment. And avoid getting the extra marinade on there. Okay. My oven is preheated to 375, and we're going to bake these for 30 minutes. Again, if you had an animal protein like chicken or beef, you'd want to be testing to make sure it's at the correct temperature. But since tofu, again, can be eaten raw, there's no need to test the temperature. We just want to bake it until our desired crispiness has been reached. So put these in for 30 minutes. About halfway through at the 15-minute mark, just turn them around a little bit, make sure all the sides are baking evenly. Our timer went off, so we can go ahead and take these out of the oven. See that they're nice and brown and crispy. If we carefully take one and break it apart, see nice flaky texture on the inside that resembles pretty close to a chicken nugget, which was our goal. Again, if you were to just do this with chicken, it would be a healthier alternative than chicken nuggets that you could buy, at the grocery store or from a fast food restaurant. So it benefits both those who need alternative diets and those who are looking for healthier alternatives than what you can get at the store or a restaurant. So that concludes our video, and thanks for following along.